my neck won't leave me alone. Will you see yourself back in the sun? The light it stings while the night it sings to me. And I'm normal how a story I can't tell, but they'll see the gift they've given to me. I could step aside, I could end this life, but this disease, it won't release, it won't be cured by the night. I guess I'm never coming back. I'm owning on.
Good evening and welcome back to the St. Pete by Night Twitch channel, where we play St. Petersburg by Night, a massive multiplayer 5th edition World of Darkness Chronicle set in the city of St. Petersburg, Florida. My name is Kent, also known as Misha Kent on all social media. I am the lead storyteller of St. Pete by Night, but here on Saturday nights, I play the role of host because this is After Dark. It is our behind the scenes talk show where we kind of peel back the veil, we look beyond the masquerade, we kind of shatter the wall and look beyond what this world of darkness is. We look kind of beyond behind the scenes and we talk to the movers and shakers. We talk to the people who make this world of darkness what it is, not just in St. Pete, but the world of darkness as a whole, because we talk to storytellers, we talk to people who run gaming stores, we talk to writers, we talk to just movers and shakers, as I like to call it. And tonight we have some very special movers and shakers in my mind, because tonight we are talking to Josh, Heath, and Zachery Naldrett, two authors, collaborators, contributors, creators, individuals who have brought the world of darkness a fresh view, a fresh light, a creative spark that has not been seen before, because it's coming from their own imaginations. It's a new perspective, I suppose, which is something that is very much needed, honestly, because we always can use more content. And so I want to allow our guests to introduce themselves. Josh and Zach, please take a moment to introduce yourselves, if you would. Josh, we'll start with you.
All right, sounds good. So I'm Josh Heath. I've been a storyteller, game master for, we'll just say, 30-ish years now. I got into role-playing games because of the World of Darkness. One of my first role-playing game experiences was playing a wow, my brain just totally died on me. It's late for me. A Toreador. I played a Toreador based on Billy Idol in my very first LARP back in the day. We'll just say it was a while ago. And I am pretty much everything except for artist in role-playing games. I edit, I write, I develop, I publish, and I have produced I think if not the most amount of products for the Storytellers Vault in one form or another. The second or third most are probably the things that I've worked on. I've also worked directly with Onyx Path Publishing and White Wolf in its Paradox form before it became the World of Darkness team, though I've done a little bit of things with the World of Darkness team as well. Yeah, so I am, like I said, a longtime World of Darkness fan, and Zach, because I'll just ramble if I don't stop, I'm going to kick it to you.
He's right, he will. I am Zachery Naldrett, he, him. I am one of those people who saw Kindred the Embrace and got into the game. I'm not all, dating myself at all when I say that I did not have a driver's license when it first aired and I first saw it. Not at all dating how old I am. Yeah, and yeah, that's how it started for me. I played in high school, went and to college and forgot about it for about 20 years until I popped in a copy of Kindred the Embrace and That was about 8 years ago now, something like that. I don't know. Time is weird now.
Well, and I think we all, because I started about the same time both of you did, based off of how we're kind of skirting around the time frame. The way we're all talking about it vaguely, I started about that time period too. But I want to get into the origin stories. But before we do that, I want to mention that we do have a giveaway on tonight's stream for everybody who's watching live at home. We are doing a giveaway of a dice set. That dice set that you see on screen right now, if you put in the hashtag DiceMePlease in the chat, you could be in the running for that specific dice set. So put the hashtag DiceMePlease in the chat and you will be in the running for that green and orange dice set. It seems perfect for a hunter or a werewolf dice set, and that will be mailed to you for free if you are in the US specifically. If you're in Canada, I can probably push for the postage to get it there, but if you're overseas, I might ask you for a few bucks to make that happen. But if you're in the US, it's absolutely free. I will ship that out to you. So if you're interested, put in hashtag DiceMePlease, and you will be in the running to get that particular dice set. It could be yours. So hashtag DiceMePlease, and those are yours tonight. So, gentlemen, let's get into your origin stories. I love the origin stories of how people discovered the world of darkness, but I want to go back a little bit further than that. How did you discover TTRPGs? Because it's always an interesting story for each individual person. Some people discovered it through books they read, whether it started with Lord of the Rings. Some people discovered it because it was a hobby their parents introduced them to. Other people because of school friends, or others because they discovered it on their own. It's always a different story or a different take on that story. So I'd ask you each individually, starting with you, Josh, what was your origin story on discovering TTRPGs?
Yeah, I've actually had to think about this quite a lot because I'm working on a webcomic describing my experience running games. And the very first tabletop RPG experience I had was a board game called Dragon Strike, which had the cool VHS DM that you could put
Yes.
in, which was an idea that was way ahead of its time and was terrible. But it was certainly an interesting experience. That's how I got this idea that there are these role-playing games that are out there. I got a red box set of D&D and ran it once for my cousin, and then that was it for like a year or so. And then I met this guy who I was working at a stitching plant, right? A place where you make clothes. You could call it a sweatshop. And this guy was like talking to me one day and mentioned role-playing games. And I was like, that sounds interesting to me. And we ended up playing Robotech. So that Robotech was the first RPG that I ever actually played. And we played about 3 or 4 games of that before he was like, hey, there's this thing called LARP at the local college. And so I made a Toreador based off of Billy Idol and got into LARPing. I used to LARP twice a week. From then, when I was, let's just say 15, until I was in my mid-20s, I LARPed at least once a week, if not multiple times a week, as well as running multiple LARPs throughout that time frame. So
You just almost went directly into World of Darkness. Like, you dabbled very briefly in anything else, but it was like a straight shot into World of Darkness.
totally, yeah. The Gray Book, Laws of the Night was my my gateway basically, and then vampire mostly, but werewolf, wraith, a little bit of everything in LARP I tried. But yeah, definitely like the first thing I jumped into.
Wow. Zach, how about you?
So the first time I had interacted with a TTRPG book was at a church. I was like maybe 8 years old. There was someone had a book. I was reading through it. I think it was like some sort of mech game. I have very little memory of it. I didn't actually play at the moment. fast forward years later, winter break of my freshman year of high school, we're at my grandmother's condo, and my stepbrother had brought the second edition of Vampire the Masquerade, which my grandmother's condo, despite being on the beach, being a grumpy teenager who did not want to be with his family, that book was way more interesting than anything else going on. Read through it throughout the course of the vacation. And then, as I mentioned, like a month or two later is when Kindred the Embraced had its network debut and its short run. And then next weekend, I was following along with him to a game at a buddy's house. My first character was a Gangrel. It was Dark Ages vampire, and I don't remember a lot of the session. I did not know what I was doing, and somehow I still managed to diablerize someone. Things happen. It was a Toreador. I got celerity from it. I didn't know what that meant, but hey, it worked out. And then from there, kind of continued playing Vampire with kind of that kind of group of people. Played with some other groups, played on some AOL chat room games. Again, it was mostly Vampire. We tried Werewolf once, and it turned into a 3-hour fight session where we were trying to, like, because we couldn't really describe like how we were doing things as a werewolf, and like the fight started when my Silent Strider Aron just charged at the enemy, and it took 15 minutes to explain exactly what I wanted to do. We were standing up. I was like getting on all fours. Okay, if he's in lupus, and then he's gonna shift into in turn, and just it was a thing. But
Yeah, that's werewolf combat though in a nutshell, isn't it though? Like there's so much you can get into about the details and all the different things you could describe about it that I feel like is unmatched by any of the other splats because there's so much you can do with just werewolf shifting in general. But
yeah. Some
that makes
20
sense.
years later, when I actually got into an actual campaign instead of that one session, Josh has seen my Ragabash do that a whole bunch.
Definitely.
I'd ask
good
you-
descriptions.
I'd ask you this though, but what is it about World of Darkness that hooked both of you? Because that being your introduction is very interesting to me. I see most people get in through Dungeons and Dragons, obviously, is usually most people's introduction. I've heard a few people find it through Pathfinder or some of the other games, Cult of Cthulhu being one that's interesting also. But World of Darkness has always been a niche game, except in the late 90s when it was at its peak, but it's always been
Right.
kind of a niche game. For it to be the intro system for both of you, or kind of your big splash into TTRPGs, is very interesting to me since it's not the big game or not most people's common introduction. What is it about it that appealed to you, and what is it about it that kept both of you hooked into TTRPG as a hobby? You know, what is it that kept you interested, especially all these years? Josh, we'll start with you.
Yeah. I think for me, I was a theater kid. I was a punk, and those things just kind of, particularly with LARP, I'm like, oh, I'm just doing an improv club event again, right? It's just a different type of improv. But then for me, the real big hook was, wait, this World of Darkness idea has a lot of depth, not just the concept of what does it mean to be immortal, right, as a vampire, and how do you deal with being a monster, etc., all of those themes. But I got really hooked into mage and werewolf for the spirituality and the philosophy and the higher concept stuff that was happening there, right? And for me, a lot of those same things were what I was interested in Vampire, right? I played a lot of Sabbat because I was interested in the idea of what does it mean to be a monster when you can let it loose, but then you have these religious overtones that are important to the sect, and how do you balance those things, right? I'm a monster, and yet I'm on this spiritual quest to
You're a
something.
zealot.
Yeah,
like you
exactly.
have. I think that's, and I could go on a whole diatribe about this because I hear Sabbat main, or I hear people say that they love the Sabbat, and my hackles go up because there's two different types of Sabbat player.
Mhm.
And there's the one type that you want to avoid with everything you have because they're going to wreck your game. And then there's the other type that is the most interesting player you could possibly play with. And
Yep.
I like that you're this type. You're the type you want to play with because you just said it. You said the religious and the restrictions and the paths, and I'm like, yes, okay. So yes, that's absolutely right. But yeah, that's fascinating, and I think that the Sabbat can be a very fascinating role to play if you're playing it right. if you're playing it with that understanding.
Definitely. Yeah.
But yeah,
Definitely kick to you.
Zach.
Um, Interview with the Vampire was a very big movie at that time, and the birth of Marvel Comics as a movie franchise, Blade, came out during that time as well. I wouldn't say I was a goth kid, but I was kind of goth adjacent. There was some certainly overlap in with some of the kids I hung out with the goth kids, with the punk kids, and so there was always that kind of certainly that aesthetic. Um, if you had if you've seen the World of Darkness documentary, um, Jason Carl at one point in that talks about the cool kids that were walking into the gaming store to play vampire. I certainly would not have classified myself that way, but I was that person that came into gaming already in that kind of vampire mindset, and with that, uh, like you wouldn't have gotten me in with to gaming with Dungeons and Dragons or um I can't even name the property that was out that I knew of back then, because I certainly knew of Dungeons and Dragons, but it never held my interest. I was not a Tolkien fan. I was not a Magic
So fantasy wasn't
player.
your thing. You
Yeah,
didn't.
no, that
Okay.
certainly was like not my thing. Dark, violent, you know, The Crow still is my favorite movie and has
Okay.
been since it came out. And you can certainly see the influence that The Crow had on the World of Darkness.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And that's the kind of stories that I wanted to be a part of.
Okay, interesting. So it sounds like, especially for you, Zach, that like media is a big influence. And you're right, like the 90s, especially, early to mid, even the late 90s, horror and especially vampires were a big part of that time period. And it seems like even in this 2000s, mid to late 2000s, they kind of had a resurgence, not necessarily in the best way, but they've had a resurgence with True Blood, Twilight, Vampire Diaries, and that it kind of comes in waves, right? Like it does. We had Bram Stoker's Dracula was popular for a while. Then we had it return with Interview and Anne Rice, and now we're having it comes in waves. And so it does make sense that that was a big appeal at the time, and I think it did come with the popularity of Vampire the Masquerade and all of that at that time period as well. But it does seem like media was a big part of the encouragement for you as why you stayed interested in it at the time. What did that help keep your interest? Like, how did you stay interested, especially when the media drifted away from that particular medium? Like, how did you stay interested beyond that after it stopped being the popular thing?
I mean, I as someone who stopped playing for 20 years and then came back to it,
That's fair. That's
that's
fair.
fair. I mean, and then I was just in a kind of different point in my life. Way too much alcohol and other substances at that time to pay attention to what was going on in media to begin with. So,
That's fair.
yeah, that I had that going on. But again, part of what kind of what helped pull me back in was, or kind of helped kind of foster was media. You know, you mentioned the Vampire Diaries, not so much that, but the original spin-off series of that was way better.
Mm-hmm.
Just, you know, Supernatural was something that got me back into that kind of mindset, the vibe, maybe not necessarily Vampire the Masquerade. Although I do like to have a thing for hunters.
Actually, I
There's the
think
thing.
Supernatural got a lot of people interested in Hunter and Hunter the Reckoning. I've seen a much bigger interest in Hunter the Reckoning than I ever saw back with the original Hunter the Reckoning. Like, this new 5th edition Hunter the Reckoning has gotten a lot more interest than it ever did before when it first came out, for me at least. So,
Yep. There was, you know, Paradox also has a bright, shiny promotional machine that White Wolf back in the day did not have. They
fair.
had, you go to your, you know, they didn't have a Twitch channel. They didn't have a World of Darkness news. They had the last page of the last book that they put out, and they were churning out a book like a month. So they had a lot of space, but still.
That's fair. So
Yeah.
the next question I'd ask you both is writing. So you took this passion for World of Darkness, for the material, for gaming as a whole, because you've both taken your love of writing beyond just World of Darkness. Like, you write for a variety of TTRPGs. I mean, both of your resumes is extremely impressive to me as somebody who can't even conceive of potentially publishing anything that he's created. But what came first, your love of TTRPGs or writing, or was it two separate things that you brought together, or did you just take your love of TTRPGs and decide to publish something? So Josh, we'll start with you. Like, was it just you were creating and creating in the TTRPG world and decide to put that into writing and publishing, or were you previously writing and publishing other things and decide to put your TTRPG works into that?
So this is a little bit of a complicated question for me, so I apologize if this gets
okay.
to be too long of an answer. But I was a writer as well as being a theater kid, right? Growing up, so I wrote a lot of terrible poetry. I wrote a lot of short stories. I tried my hand at a novel that never went anywhere. So I did a lot of writing, right? And then in the mid 2000s, I joined the Army. And that was a total shift of my life. Like, I'd been homeless before that, and just not in a good place. Joined the military, continued running role-playing games, mostly tabletop. While I was in the military, I actually got an award for running D&D twice weekly while I was deployed, because it was a morale boosting activity, right? According to the people who gave me the award. I'm whatever. I thought it was cool that I got, notice for running games, right? So anyway, but fast forward to grad school, and I had this plan. My plan after going through grad school was to go to work for the UN, and I was going to do that. And in my final semester of grad school, a professor said to me, "You are going to hate working for the UN. I know this is your dream. That's what you want to do." And after a couple of conversations with him and other people, he was absolutely right. Like, that was not going to work for me. And so I came up with this idea to create a program to do intercultural dialogue using role-playing games, called Reach Out Role-Playing Games. And to promote that project, I realized that it would be helpful to build a network of people within the tabletop role-playing game industry to help that project get off its feet. And freelancing was a good way to do that. I had, before that, zero interest in writing for role-playing games. Never crossed my mind. Even when I was playing games all the time, I never even considered that it was a job someone could do, right? Obviously, these books had to come from somewhere, but it was never in my brain that I would be a person writing in the industry, right? But I had this project idea. I saw freelancing was a way of building a network to do the project. And then that's kind of where it went from there. I went to the Grand Masquerade in 2016, saw the new Paradox White Wolf kind of stand up at the very beginning, and realized this Storytellers Vault thing would be a great angle for me because I've been running and playing World of Darkness games for so long that I could just create something without having to reference anything, right? I could do it almost from memory. Even character sheets, like I could whip out a character sheet without having to look at a book. Merits and flaws would be the only thing that I'd have to stop for a minute and be like, what are these right, what are the right ones for this particular character? But that's where I got started, was writing on the vault almost from day one. I had books out, and then I got freelance gigs from that and from other freelance stuff, and it kind of snowballed into where everything is today. But yeah, long story short, I was not intending to write for role-playing games, but did so as a way of getting my foot into the industry for other reasons. It seems to be working out at the moment.
Well, and you brought up a really good point, which was in the age we were raised in the age we came up in, it didn't seem like an accessible field. It just seemed like these things kind of materialized out of nowhere. Like, obviously they did have to come from somewhere, but like how did you get into something like that? Like, how do you get into? No, they came from somewhere. You had to know a guy who knew a guy, or you had to be born into it or something. Like, there was no clear path. And now, just like in music and movies and everything, there's paths everywhere. Like YouTube and Storytellers Vault and, Drive Through RPG and like all these things, you can get out there. You can create. You can get published on Amazon. You can, make movies. Like, it's so much easier to have your stuff accessible now than it's ever been. But it wasn't. It didn't used to be that way. And so it's cool, and it's an awesome opportunity. But what I would ask you, and we'll make this the next question for both of you, is there a fear of there being too much oversaturation? That there's too much material out there, and is it too easy to get lost? But I want to save that for the next question. Zach, did you have a history with writing, and did that encourage you to bring TTRPG into writing, or was it TTRPG that inspired you to get into writing? Go.
It was probably TTRPG that got me inspired in writing. I took a creative writing course in high school, where I wrote a lot of bad gangrel related short stories and poems that always got a disapproving look from my teacher when I turned it in, and comments about it being too violent. There's been the kind of idea that, like, oh, I could be a writer, sure, if I just figured out how to do it. At one point in high school, I wanted to go to college in Atlanta so that I could be an intern at White Wolf. My parents did not have take the weekend off to fly you down to Georgia to go visit school money. They had, okay, we can get there by car. You can look at that school money. Oh, we have to stay at a hotel. Nope, we can't do that. So that didn't work out for that reason. Like, completely unrelated to TTRPGs, I had ideas about a screenplay for a zombie movie that I wanted to do and just never kind of got around to getting it started. It was off of a Cults of the Blood God. I backed to the point to the one where you could write an Oblivion ceremony. And what I wrote, for the most part, it was cleaned up by people who had experience writing, and who had spent time working on within the property, to get kind of tone and things like that. But for the most part, the death rattle that you see in Trails of Ash and Bone is the death rattle that I wrote and submitted it to be. And that inspired me to start kind of writing for VTRPGs. There is a there's a Storytellers Collective, which is run by Ashley. I am going to forget her last name right now. Who has done work on multiple Dungeons and Dragons related things and other things like that. Who she essentially runs various writing workshops. Write your own first adventure. I took that and wrote Hunter's Hunted Tale. A month later, I turned out a scenario for like retelling the story of Sleepy Hollow, which happened to be on the like 200th anniversary of the original publishing of the book, and it was a V20 story for both Camarilla and Sabat. And if you've read that, you can tell which one of the two I favor, because one of them is just not fair for the players. But yeah, that's like how I got into it. Is was kind of pulled in from that kind of. I always had some idea of music, just never found a way to capitalize or never found the motivation to do it until I got those like words of encouragement. Like, yeah, this is good, you know.
But that's a great, what a great boost to get to see someone say, we like this, we're just going to polish it up a little bit, and then to have it included in a property that you have idolized and admired for so long, to see it actually made official, something you've created officially. That's the dream, isn't it? Like that's what we've all wanted, and that's something that we had basically been raised believing was impossible, right? Like that's what we were told our whole youth, that like that's inaccessible, you can't do that, that's impossible. But now it's been made possible. You know, I've had the opportunity to talk to so many people now that have contributed to official World of Darkness publishings at this point, that it's like it is possible. They are looking and drawing from the community now and bringing people in, and are really making it accessible to this point that it does feel possible to get involved and to contribute. And with things like Storytellers Vault, you can contribute and people can adopt and use your stuff. But again, I do want to take it back to what I asked. Now that it is possible to have your stuff added to the lexicon of possibilities, now that they are creating community content and places to create stuff, is there a fear of oversaturation? Is there a fear of too many possibilities, of a market being over flooded with content? And what do you as content creators do to stand out, to make your stuff stand out from everyone else, to make sure your stuff is of a higher quality, or make it worthwhile, make it that your stuff does better than what everyone else puts out? Josh.
I don't think there's I'll go back and forth on this, right? I don't think today, at least, I don't think there's such thing as an oversaturated market, right?
Okay.
I think that creative ideas, creative endeavors can always have more, right? If you are a creative person, if you're interested in writing or drawing or doing anything else in any creative field, do it, right? Put it out there, get feedback, get paid, right? Whatever it is that helps keep you motivated to do the thing right, do it. I think the second part of your question is more important, right? If you want your product to be seen, you have to do 3 different things. You have to make the best product that you are capable of making. And that means you have to get help to get there, almost always. That's an editor, that's feedback from friends, whatever. you can't just put out a thing without no one else looking at it and expecting it to do well. Just in general, that's true. The other part there, though, is like you have to keep trying, right? And you have to not just do it once, you have to do it 15 times, 20 times, right? You're always iterating on what have I done before? What new thing can I create, right? And then in today's weird social media landscape, you have to find the community that wants to pay attention to your material and get the material in front of them. That's the hard part, honestly. Like the creative part, I think, is easier. It's the getting your product seen by people in the right places is harder. And the best thing you can do there is create a good product, and then people will sell it for you, right? That's the way that it really gets down the road to you making real money off of it.
Absolutely. Word of mouth, I've found as someone who owned their own business for 10 years, like you can advertise, you can dump money, into Facebook Marketplace or whatever, having people advertise for you. But the truth is, if you make a good product, your customers will sell your product for you because they will tell everyone they know about it. So if you write a good book or run a good game, that is going to do better than anything you could pay for. Like that sells itself. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's absolutely well said. Zach, how about you? What are your thoughts on all of that?
I mean, if you go to Storytellers Vault right now, filter out Storytellers Vault content in just 5th edition, there's how many Sabbat books out there?
Yeah, I think 10 at the
So
moment, last time I counted.
searching with the words Sabbat with this filter of Storytellers Vault in 5th edition comes up with 42 titles. So yeah, there certainly is the potential for there to be oversaturation. Again, same thing, if you type in Bali into Storytellers Vault 5th edition, you're getting 11 results.
Hey,
There's
I
a
got
lot-
one of those. Zach, stop.
there's a lot out there, because it's the idea of finding something that is, for me, it's finding something that is missing from what there is. I took a look at the official Sabbat book. I did not see, I didn't think that the forgotten paths. I thought that needed to be a little bit expounded on, because I thought those are certainly things that can be playable and still have a place in V5. And they were just kind of pushed off to the side, describing me like these were a thing and they existed, and we're not going to say anything more about that than these 3 paragraphs. So yeah, it's finding those holes that aren't met by what is out there, and writing it. For me, a lot of times there's not adventures or scenarios for vampire. It's something that was kind of maybe underutilized in some of the prior editions, and it's something that once you played through the official stuff, and if you're someone who is on the Storytellers Vault, you probably have all the official stuff anyways, and you've gone through that, and now you're looking for something outside of what can be offered. So finding those spots is kind of what I've looked at, and that's kind of what's drawn me in. Why I haven't written V5 anything since then is because I haven't seen anything that I feel like I want to put out there. Before the Second Inquisition book came out, I had 5,000 words written up for the Society of Leopold, and they just kind of went a completely different direction than what I was expecting, and I didn't find a way to work that in. So it's never gotten past the first draft.
So actually, that brings up a really good point. When you're creating something, do you ever worry, or do you ever find yourself kind of concerned that World of Darkness is going to come out with something that's going to contradict something you've written, or is going to completely undo something you've done? Because I could see that being a concern, that the canon is going to completely obliterate something you've created. Now, I believe, and I've always believed, storytellers can do whatever they want. They've never been bound by the restrictions of what World of Darkness publishes or what Wizards of the Coast publishes. But there are some people who are like, they're restricted. They feel restricted, or they feel bound to whatever is written on the page by the official creators. But do you, as authors or creators of content, do you feel nervous about that, or do you feel hesitant to put stuff out with the possibility that something might come up that can undo all that? Josh.
I could care less. And I have to take that attitude now because I wrote Dark New England as Beckett's Jihad Diary came out and before V5 came out, right? And so I was writing that knowing a lot of the stuff that I'm putting down in this is probably not going to fit V5 lore. Like I had some hope I was going to get at least close with a couple of things. But when V5 came out, multiple things that I had put down on paper that I was like, this is absolutely how I would write it. The folks who wrote V5 went in a different direction, right? To me, that doesn't invalidate the product, right? To me, it means that there is either divergent storytellers, right? As in those characters in the world itself telling you a different story. And maybe someone's lying, right? That unreliable narrator is an essential part of the World of Darkness. So I think it's almost better to have competing narratives, right? Where one thing is true, the other thing is true at the same time, right? How do you, work through those problems? So, I think as a creator, don't worry about that, right? Tell a good story, create a good product. It's funny when you see people who are aware of your product intentionally not say a thing about a thing, right? Because they're reacting to the thing that you've said. And then by not saying it, it allows that space for that thing to either continue or for them not to step into your like IP, right?
Right.
So write where you're going to write.
Right on. Zach.
So it certainly depends. I've seen a lot of people who have had success looking at this, and I'll use this about book as an example. People looked at it and were like, no, this is the Sabbat. This is what I want it to be. I'm putting this out there for other people to see. And it's kind of how much you're invested in, how much you want something to become manifest, and put it out there. I had, for other reasons, I had bad taste after looking at the Second Inquisition book, and I was like, you know what, I don't want to. I didn't want to continue with what I had going at that time. It's this is not something that I am doing for money. I am not making a sufficient amount of money. It pays for what I buy off of drive-through. That's about it. And I spend a lot of money on drive-through, but I'm very thankful. But this is not, money that I need. That this is not a job. This is a hobby. This is kind of a free time thing. And if I don't have that kind of focus and that, like, yes, I want to see that through, I'll put it just on the side, and maybe someday I'll come back to it. There's certainly things that I've released after the fact, for a fair amount of time after I had written it. An example is the werewolf thing I put out about patrons of the Southwest. I wrote that like 2 years before I put it out. Just didn't I had the draft. I just didn't have the drive to push it through until I found the right time to put it through.
For sure.
I Sleepy Hollow, I turned that around start to finish in like 3 weeks because I had the motivation to get it out. If something else is on my mind, so I'll go a different direction. I'll find another creative outlet. Um, you know, it's something that you have to enjoy and you have to have that passion for it. And if it's, you might have a good start on something, and if something turns, the idea is not there. What's it's a struggle and it's no longer fun to push it, something
Yeah.
like that across the finish line.
Well, I can
You
tell
can-
you as a frequent peruser of Storytellers Vault, it is always nice to see creators such as yourselves putting out alternatives to what World of Darkness is publishing, what they're putting out there. For example, when Werewolf 5th Edition came out, we try to use the rules as written and try to stay on the cusp of whatever they're releasing. We always, in our community, want to have the up-to-date rules, disciplines, everything they're releasing, or splats they're releasing. So when they released Werewolf, we wanted to make Werewolf available as soon as possible, and to bring it forward as soon as possible. But when we got the rules and we were making our first table, we found that there were things that were kind of missing, and we were trying to figure out the mechanics and trying to make them work. So I went to Storytellers Vault, and we eventually discovered Kaldorian's Reclawed rules, and we started implementing some of those. And so having that as an option, seeing that somebody pushed through and made something that could work and could adapt the rules and kind of fill in some of those gaps that were missing, was so valuable. So I love that there are people like yourselves who push through, find the passion, are, so passionate about this that it isn't about the money. It's about the love of the game. It's about taking something and making it work because they love it so much, because they want it to be out there, and that's so valuable. So what I want to talk about next is the differences in editions, because I looked over both of your offerings and what you have available, and I've seen a lot of 20th anniversary stuff as well as some 5th edition offerings, but primarily 20th anniversary seemed to be where both of your passions were. But before we got to that, I want to mention our dice giveaway again, so I'm going to do that really quickly. For everybody watching live right now, we are doing a dice giveaway tonight, as we have for the last several After Darks. You can win that dice set that you see on screen right now by using the hashtag DiceMePlease in the chat. If you are in the United States, you will get that for free by putting hashtag DiceMePlease. We will draw the winner at the end of the broadcast tonight, and those will be shipped out to you as soon as possible. Just put hashtag Dice Me Please in the chat, and we will draw that winner by the end of the evening. And you could get a full set of dice that could be used in any World of Darkness chronicle. Just put in hashtag Dice Me Please in the chat, and those could be yours.
And they're much better looking than the official werewolf dice.
They're much better looking than the official werewolf dice, it's true. And they make more sense. You don't have to decipher what the different symbols mean. But let's talk about the editions, because there are a lot of strong opinions about editions, and I don't believe in any of the edition wars nonsense. Play what you want to play. There's value in both. Do whatever you want to do. But I want to kind of get a feel for where your preferences lie, why you kind of lean more towards one than another, what your feelings are about it. Josh, let's start with you. Kind of what are your feelings about 20th anniversary versus 5th edition, and what makes you prone to writing more towards 20th versus 5th? Or is it just kind of like what you're inspired by at any given point? The fact that maybe 20th has more offerings available and therefore more opportunities to write towards it? Or, what's the dealio? Let's just say that.
Yeah. This is a hard question because I'm just trying to decide what I want to say here,
Sure.
right? Because there's a lot of things that could be said, some good and some bad. 20th anniversary edition feels to me like it is. It's an encapsulation, continuation of everything that came before, right? It's metaplot agnostic. It is mechanically compatible with revised and second edition and first edition, even, right? For almost all the game lines. So for me, it's easier to write for because I have been immersed in it for so long, right? So it is a continuation of the things that I'm already, when it comes to World of Darkness, interested in. That said, I'm done writing for Vampire. I do not have any vampire stuff in my brain right now and don't expect to in the near future. Partially because I've started to personally, and I don't push this on anybody, but personally am now uncomfortable with some of the metaphors of being a vampire, of feeding on people. That makes me uncomfortable as a person now. And so I would look at the other game lines, right, and go, okay, well, the next game line that I am much more interested in is werewolf. And politely, if anyone is interested, there is an almost 4-hour long interview with me and a few other folks where I tell you all the reasons why I would never write anything for Werewolf 5th edition. And I don't want to bring that here, right? That's just going to be negativity. But Werewolf 5th edition is not a game that I'm interested in diving deeper into and providing material for. So at this stage, if I was writing anything for the World of Darkness, it would have to be something that grabbed me and inspired me that I couldn't find in another place, right? It might be mage related, could be changeling related, right? I could see myself doing something for those. But honestly, I'm at the moment looking to write hope punk games, right? Things that drive me to be the best person that I can be. And I see that less in the World of Darkness than I used to. And so that's where I'm spending a lot of my energy. So that's my very polite way of answering that question.
I appreciate that. No, that's totally honest and legitimate. And truthfully, I mean, looking at the landscape of the world, I mean, that can be modeled in, if honestly, I think we can look towards the World of Darkness when we feel the world is in a comfortable place that we can delve into darker themes.
Yeah.
When the world is not in a comfortable place, it's hard to access darker thematic elements within ourselves, to play in a dark playground if we are feeling uncomfortable in the state of things in our own world. And I think that's accessed in media. You'll see a lot more dark horror movies come out when we're in a happier time period because people are more comfortable going to that place. Whereas when we're in a darker time period, you see less of that material, or you'll see more fantastical horror elements come out and less real life, realistic horror elements come out. And so I get that. I totally get that you want to go towards more of a, hopeful punk element like that. That absolutely makes sense. So I totally appreciate that viewpoint, and that's very, very helpful. Honestly, that's a really good perspective to take. I appreciate that. Zach, how about you?
I will go into kind of there are some, when Vampire 5th edition came out, I was very big for it. I thought it was it was a very good step forward mechanically, and I think it was very well done there. There are some things that I had, quibbles with that I could forgive. And then have you played Shadows of New York?
I have, yeah.
Okay. So the first time where the character's girlfriend is in the background and makes a comment about having shipping issues of her product, and cancellations, I was like, really? You're gonna put this in, date your game like that? When they made it part of the story that a character that they took the feeding element out of that game, that there was a pandemic going on, I got really fucking annoyed after having 2 months before buried the first of my friends to die of COVID. At the end of the game, where the girlfriend gives you a guilt trip about ignoring what she's dealing with, the pandemic, and dealing with your own things, I threw my remote at the wall and almost broke it. I calmed down, gave it some time. February, I see someone from the World of Darkness sharing on their personal Twitter account, joking about a Bloodlines character being the cause of COVID, which I thought was really a bad move. And I had hope at the time, after Justin Akili had been brought on, that this kind of thing would stop, because like these were things that were like personally hurtful to me, because they always seem to happen like a month or two after a friend dies of COVID. Justin Akili comes on. If you have the New York by Night, there is a fantastic write-up on the credits page about the events of 9/11 and why that was not made part of the story, made part of the World of Darkness at that time. And I get about 6 pages into the second Inquisition book, and they joke, and it's a punchline. Like 2 weeks after, I virtually attended the wake for my friend Anthony. Like, at that point, I was ready to just write everything off at that time. I was fuming. I gave like my last, I was like, okay, different line. I'll read Hunter of the Reckoning. And this is a book that should have just hit everything for me. This should have been like right in my wheelhouse. This is the book that I wanted. And it just kind of felt flat. And I don't know if that was other preconceptions, if I was already in kind of a negative mindset on the product, so that I didn't filter it, or I looked at it with biased, and I wasn't looking at it for the joy of reading a book about hunters. I was looking at it for something that would be like, what did they do this time to disappoint me? And I haven't bought a World of Darkness product since then. So I haven't read anything that has inspired me to write for it. That's not to say that I never will again, but at the same time, I'm not, as that kind of crack in it started opening up other things, situations going on with outside of the books, that I personally, wasn't a fan of, and it was like, yeah, this does not put these people in a good light. And if this is what they're doing in real life, do I want to be buying books to kind of go along with that? I, I can't make this kind of comment about Josh has about Werewolf 5th edition, because I haven't read it. I haven't
That's
bought
fair.
it. I read the samples pages that were put out there. I saw some comments defending it, where they were trying to make the tribes like the rest of the tribes. But when I looked at those other tribes, they didn't strip away the history that behind them, which made me go back and look at things critically and vampire. So I'm not, it's an opinion. I'm not, I don't like kind of the direction that it went in. And so until there's something that draws my attention to it, I'm not gonna
No,
read it. So I've got nothing to pull from.
it's interesting because I feel like there's a lot of, sometimes it feels like there's a 1 step forward, 2 steps back, or 2 steps forward, 2 steps back approach with some of the World of Darkness properties recently. Because like they made this big grandiose statement with Werewolf that they were like, we're starting over. It's a brand new canon. We're erasing everything that came before. Then they released the Shattered Nation book, and they make all these references to the old lore. And it's like, well, you said we're starting over. Why are you mentioning King Albrecht? Why are you mentioning, all the you said we're starting over. Why are we still mentioning this stuff? Like,
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
say we're starting over and then keep going back on that. Like, you gotta stick to what you say. But this is the problem, right? Like,
Yeah.
they don't have a clear vision. They lose Justin Achille. They're losing creative directors left and right. They can't keep a solid team because it seems like when they have a person, that person's like, okay, this is the way it's going to work. Then somebody disagrees, probably someone up high, tells them no. They give up and leave, and then the direction shifts again, and then it shifts again, and then it shifts again. So there's no clear direction, and it's just scattershot everywhere. And so I see that frustration. I can totally see that frustration. And you're not the first individuals I've talked to that have said that out of the old, loved people who beloved World of Darkness who have kind of given up on it for a very good reason. I don't disagree with that. I can totally see. And that hurts me. That makes me sad for all of us because I also was so happy to see World of Darkness still living. When White Wolf closed, I thought that was it. I thought we were done. When Chronicles of Darkness came out, my heart broke because I was like, we are done. Like, that's it. What we love is gone. It's over. But then when I saw that a 5th edition existed, I was like, holy cow, it's still here. It's gonna keep going. And then it was not living up to what I had hoped. And I see that on all of our faces. I see that heartbreak, and I want to support it, hoping it's going to come back somehow, that the right people are going to be put in the right place, and that it can come back. But Bloodlines 2 could be horrible, and that hurts me. Go ahead, Zach.
If it ever comes out. But to bring it back to something that you mentioned at the beginning, with what the media is that is influencing it, World of Darkness that we see now is not necessarily being influenced by Blade, by Crow, by Interview with Vampire. It's being influenced by Twilight and by Vampire Diaries and New Blood and these other media that weren't there that we may not have come up in. And that's bringing in a different audience. And there's a lot of times, it's not necessarily maybe an edition war where there's, V20 versus V5. It's the people who are drawn to V5 are coming from a different outside media than the people who came through 2nd edition, revised, etc. And we may have different visions of what a vampire is.
That said, Zach, like I actually think I don't think V5 knows what it wants, who it's speaking to, because it could speak to that new set of vampire media effectively. And I think it would be a good game if it did that. But it tries to kind of speak to everything, and it doesn't do so well. And I think this speaks to the point about what is the vision, right? What is the point? What is the theme and mood of this game, right? And I think we need a strong theme and mood for these games to work well, right? And I don't think we're there. I think we're super far away from there.
One of the ways I would describe World of Darkness, old World of Darkness, was it was unapologetically edgy. It can't be that now. It has to be mindful of the mistakes it made before. And that's fair. The world is a lot more sensitive now, and rightfully so. I will say, rightfully so. So before the pitchfork and torches come out, rightfully so. We can't be releasing some of the books that they released way back when. That wouldn't fly now. But in doing so, they are still making mistakes and backpedaling constantly because of the mistakes they're making. When they should either steer into the skid and just accept the fact that they've made those mistakes and own them and just keep pushing forward, or they should give up and just let go. Like it's a hard line to walk. This is an edgy game and people are expecting a certain amount of edge, and if they play it too safe, they're not doing it justice. And if they play it too edgy, they're going to offend too many people. So they have to find that safe space, that very delicate line where they're going to please both sides. And it's hard to do. They're going to offend somebody, but they got to offend the right people. And that's a really hard place to go, because that's what keeps it niche, is they're going to offend someone no matter what. So they got to choose who they're going to offend. Unfortunately, because they were offending people back in the day too. That's why it was niche. They were offending somebody.
But I think the World of Darkness also recognized that it was trying to speak to a progressive message, right?
Yeah.
The original intent of Vampire the Masquerade, I will say this, I have gotten people at White Wolf to say this, right? Their intent was, you are anarchs breaking down this system of the Camarilla, right? You are supposed to be the punks on the street, realizing you have the power, realizing you have the ability to see all these systems of racism and harmful capitalism, crony capitalism, right? Oppressing and harming people, and you're able to step on the heads of those people in this game and say, we're not going to deal with any of this, right? It was in some ways a training tool for the benefits of collective action, right? V5 is not about that, right? And to be fair, the World of Darkness community enjoyed playing the Camarilla, right? They enjoyed playing the murder hobo Sabbat, right? So they're in some ways rewriting the game to be the game that people are playing, for good or bad. And we saw that in Revise too. Don't get me wrong. Revise was very much, oh, people are playing the Camarilla, we should make them the default, right? Like,
here's an Elysium book.
Right.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the intent of the World of Darkness to begin with, right? And like, I think in my perfect world of like a V6 would be recognizing that the game we want maybe can't exist right now, right? But we should try and find a game that at least is speaking to this idea of the world kind of sucks. How can we make it better, while recognizing that if we go too far, we become the monsters that we are fighting against, right? Well, there's good space there.
I would say in V5 now what they're trying to do is be like, yeah, okay, you can play Camarilla, you can play Anarch. We cut out Sabbat because we don't want you to play Sabbat anymore, because we think that's toxic and offensive and bad. Like, people were getting dangerous about playing Sabbat, so we're just going to take them out of the equation because Gehenna happened, so get them out of here. Because people, some of our more toxic players played Sabbat, so let's just get them out. But now we're going to force you to play young. You got to be one of the young generations, because we're saying elders are gone. Yep. So you got to be one of the young generations. Oh, people didn't like that? Okay, here's the Gehenna War book. You can play old now. Like, sorry, here's the rules for playing an elder. Sorry about that. So yeah, like, again, no clear vision. I think the original vision was the elders are gone. You are young vampires trying to inherit the world after Gehenna. Here's the deal. But because they got any pushback, because people were a little upset, they backpedaled, dropped everything, threw books out. Bad books, I'll say it, bad books, threw books out to make up for the mistakes or for the pushback that they got, instead of just saying, nope, that's the vision, we're going with it. You are young vampires. That's what you're getting from us. If you don't want to, we have those books. You can go buy them. They exist. You want to play Elders? The Elder books exist. They're called the old editions. Go buy them. Like that's what. Okay, so let's get to the next question because I
Well,
can go on about it. Yeah, Zach.
I think you mentioned they put out you can play Camarilla or Anarchs, and then they put out LA by Night, which I'm not saying anything against the show, or cast or that was not Anarch play. That is the reason why people call Anarch Camarilla, because that's what they were essentially doing, and with that, because reading the Anarch book, none of that kind of society, none of that maneuvering is in there. It's very much a different book. Second thing I just want to say, is if you go to World of Darkness right now, first thing it says, World of Darkness, visit dark and immersive places, link to say, explore our games, and it's nothing but video games. So the idea that they don't know what they're looking to do, and that they're really just letting the video games developers do what they want, which is why you got Blood Hunt, which,
Right.
again, not taking away from the game. Open warfare in the middle of the streets of Prague is not vampire.
Right.
Prague
Or at
of all
least
places, from a
that-
vampire history perspective.
Like, and when I heard this, I was like, okay, maybe you're reenacting when Theo Bell turns, and it's the chaos that ensues after that. Maybe that's what they're going with. No, nothing like that. Just Blood Hunt, just free for all killing. Yeah, so you get very different flavors from that as well.
So here would be my question, and then I'm gonna kind of wrap up our talk about the World of Darkness because I want to talk about what you guys are doing. You're my guests, and I know this is a World of Darkness focused show, but you're my guests, and I want to hear about what you guys are up to now and promote some of the stuff you guys are doing. But what would it take to bring you back? In an ideal world, what would World of Darkness need to do to bring back the love that you had for what they were doing, to get you hooked again? What could they do, if they even could? If it's gone, if that book is closed, if you have put a bow on your love of the World of Darkness and you have moved on, that's a perfectly legitimate answer. That is a fair thing to say, and just say, I'm done with it. I understand. But if there was even a possibility, if that door has a crack and there's a slight stream of light coming through, what could they possibly do to correct course and bring you back into the fold? Because nothing breaks my heart more than seeing something that we've all loved, kind of lose us after all these years, So I would ask you that. What could they do to bring it back? Josh, I would start with you.
So I think I may read vampire books potentially in the future, but I'm never going to play it again, right? Vampire's gone to me. And that's in no way actually a call out to anyone writing vampire. That is
Right.
100% a me issue with the conceit of vampires, right? So
Absolutely.
that's where I'm at with that. Werewolf would have to actually understand what the game was about for me to come back to it, right? It has to be a game about spirituality, a sense of being able to recognize that communities and cultures and tribes mean something, right? That these constructed communities, they play by rules, right? Humans have rules on how they build these sorts of communities. Currently, that game does not understand how communities are created at all. And that to me is the thing that stops me. There's lots of things that bother me about Werewolf 5th edition, but that's the part that as a person with degrees in how humans build communities, I'm like, I can't get into this game because you're just failing to recognize basic like human nature, right? In building a tribe. There's nothing to unite these people into a tribe, right? Like you've got to tell me what it is, the thing that unites them, that brings them together, right? So we'd have to like reevaluate the way tribes are built. And I could live with not having human cultures involved in the tribes if you give me coherent other tribal building structures, right? I'm on board. I would at least read that book, right, and consider it deeply.
Yeah, you can't just have patron spirits and verbs and adverbs be the thing that defines an entire tribe. Like
Yeah,
you
and
need a little something extra, and
exactly.
I agree completely. Like there's nothing else there. The meat of what defined the tribe being broken down to one page
Yeah,
shocked the crap out of me that they completely condensed all that was the tribe. They had whole books about the tribes before, and now
yeah.
they've condensed an entire tribe description to one page.
And you could even tell me the patron spirits go out and collect these people very specifically, and they worship this spirit, right? And I'd be like, at least that is something. But the book fails to even do that, right? Anyway, for me, if I were to come back to other World of Darkness games, right? Hunter is actually, to me, the one I'm most comfortable with of the current editions. I don't feel like it's Reckoning. I think it is Hunter's Hunted with a little bit of Reckoning flavor built in, and I think that's a fine game, right? I think that it could be a good, like, it is a good game to use. I have played that game, right, and I have enjoyed it. But to me, Mage is my big game now, and so a Mage 5th edition would have to recognize that it is inherently a philosophical game tied up into human magical traditions, right? And I do not know if you are following the current path of these games, they wouldn't do that, right? These creators of this game currently would not do that because they've chosen not to with Werewolf, right? And so
I am so terrified of them releasing Mage. I am so
same.
terrified, and I feel like it's next, and I am so scared because that game should be last. That game it's got the most potential to break everything, and it should be last.
And
And
even Changeling would actually be easier for them to make
yeah,
right now, right?
yeah,
You
they
could,
should drop Wraith, they should drop Changeling, they should drop
yep.
all these other games first, and Mage should be last. Because if they're gonna break everything, at least do it when everything else is done. Do it last, and then you can just be like, well, we don't have anything else to release anyway. Here you go. Because oh my god, it has. Yeah, if you're gonna screw it all up, at least screw it all up when we're done with everything else. Like, don't. Uh, I'm so scared. I'm so scared.
So to answer your question, it would be hard for me to
Yeah,
get back into
understandably.
the world of darkness, right? It's not
Understandably.
impossible. It would
Yeah.
just be hard, right? It would a significant reevaluation of the direction of the game lines. And honestly, most of V5 does build on previous stuff in Vampire, right? So there could be a few things done to, at least from a storytelling perspective, make me go, that is a Vampire game, even if I'm not going to play it, right?
Right.
But
So if they released like a Werewolf 5-5 where they redid it and did like the tribes the way you described and stuff like that, maybe you'd be like, okay,
I would at least consider it.
okay.
There are other things that have bothered me
Of
about the
course.
construction of the book,
Yeah. Right.
but I would at least consider it.
Okay. Zach, how about you?
My joke answer would be that they acknowledge that Bloodstained Love came off of my April Fool's cover for fucking Kindred uh, Guide to Vampire Sex. But there are people who have developed for or written for 5th edition that if they asked me to work on Hunter, I'd say yes. If they asked me to work on Vampire, I would be hesitant, and I would need to. It would need to be the right project. Like if you came on to say like, "Hey, we want to do a chronicle about uh, the followers of Set and how they're really different than the Ministry," um, I probably would, pass on that. Um, it would have to really speak to my interest. If you've got a book actually explaining what the differences between Caitiff and Thin Bloods are that you need work on, I'm available. There people who that I've worked with that know how to get in touch with me, but I don't see anything beyond that for to get me to write for Werewolf. Sorry, for Vampire. And Werewolf is just um, yeah, I'm not probably not touching Werewolf. They probably didn't want me to touch Werewolf, to be honest. I've had enough discussions with people who wrote for them that we had to change the topic because of non-disparity clauses. So I might already be on a list of those. So
So let's talk about what you're doing now, because you do have very impressive resumes, and I do encourage everyone to go check out the listings and offerings that these two gentlemen have already put out on Storyteller Vault. Like there are incredible, incredible offerings from both of them. They have just collections upon collections of things that you can add to your 20th anniversary games, and some offerings for the 5th edition games. And if nothing else, even if you don't play 20th anniversary, just the lore or just the ideas, the inspirations you can get from some of these offerings. For example, there is a Wild West vampire offering. So if you want to run a game set in the Wild West for vampire, you can take some of the material from the 20th anniversary edition and just make it 5th edition. If you prefer to run it in a 5th edition setting, you could still take a lot of the offerings from the 20th anniversary and just translate it into 5th edition. They have got you covered, and I'm going to make sure to show those pages and give those links before the end of the show here, but there's a lot to offer. But you guys also work with a lot of other systems as well, and I think our viewers, as diverse as they are, they play a lot of other games, so I think they'd be happy to hear about your other offerings as well. So Josh, what else have you worked on, and what are you currently working on?
Yeah. Oh, it's hard to decide what to start with. I will say this. We actually, Zach and I recently released a module for V5 called Return to Seoris, which is designed for people who are coming from Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and more dungeon crawly games to get you to be able to run Vampire, right? And we wrote that a while ago, legitimately, like 3 years ago. And it took me a while to be like, get my head back around it and put it out. But I think it's a really good adventure, right? I think it is a really good tool if people want to get into these games, right? I also released one called A Crooked Smile, which is for V5, which is designed as a toolbox game for running this very particular story with this NPC in it, right? I wrote that before the companion even came out, right? But it was designed to work with the companion in my head when I wrote it. So those are things that are out there that if you're into the current editions, check them out. I think they're really good tools for doing that.
And if anybody's interested in running a player run one-shot on server, those would be good ideas to run. You could run those as one of the one-shots on our server. Anyway, please continue.
For sure. I recently, so I am the chief operations officer for a company called High Level Games. We recently put out a game called Army Men, where you play little plastic army people in a little plastic army world. It is designed as a 5th edition D&D clone, but it goes in different directions with that, right? And it can either be played silly or it can be played super serious. as a military veteran, I helped make sure that it took the concept of war and dealing with trauma seriously. And that sounds ridiculous when you're saying you're playing plastic army people, but I think it's helpful to use those tools to kind of back away from real things and address them by saying, hey, I'm a plastic soldier, but what does it mean to be traumatized in war as a plastic soldier can help you as a real person deal with those things in your life, right? But talk to a therapist if you're actually doing therapy. The other thing that I'm working on that I haven't talked a lot about yet, but is deep in development, is I'm working on my own vampire game. I said I wasn't interested in vampires because of one particular thing. And so I thought about the thing that interested me about vampires. And one thing in particular was this idea of they have to be invited into a house, right? So what if a vampire has to be invited to do anything, right? And so this vampire game that I'm working on is going to be a game where you are a vampire that has to have active consent to feed, to use your powers, to interact with the world, right? And these vampires have worked for thousands of years to try to make the world a better place. So it is thematically, in my mind, almost the exact opposite of Vampire the Masquerade, right? Is instead of saying you will definitely become a monster, it's saying you start as a being with hungers and restrictions and problems, and yet you are working on yourself constantly and you are overall mentally healthy. What would you do with eternity if you are relatively mentally healthy and able to try to make the world a better place, right? So that's the thing that I'm working on right now, that I'm excited about. I'm getting like promo art created and we're writing bits and pieces of it. I don't know when it will be out, but we will eventually do a Kickstarter for it. And I'm excited because it lets me do some of the lore stuff that I love about vampire, the good like storytelling, like history lore, and use that and then say, again, you instead of being a monster, you're trying to be better, right? You're trying to be a good leader supporting people. And yet when you're like fighting against the evils of humanity, you can't directly do anything, right? You can't attack that human that is hurting people directly because they're never going to consent to you doing that. How do you work the world to eliminate these harms while still like being restricted by these things that
Well,
you're
you
restricted
can't
by?
actually take direct action. How do you take care
Tweak
of
it.
it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. I find that absolutely fascinating. So we're gonna have to stay in touch about that because I'd be interested in keeping tabs on that. That's really, really cool. Oh man. Uh Zach, how about you? What are you working on currently? I mean, we heard some of Josh, but I'd love to hear your perspective on that stuff as well and what else you're working on.
So yeah, I have, I've I kind of transitioned away from, I mean, I started doing it a little bit before, but my focus more on other community content programs. Um, my still longest thing that I've ever written is They Came to Get You, Barbara, which Josh edited and did layout for, because that was, with 30,000 word tribute to Night of the Living Dead using They Came from Beyond the Grave. And kind of after doing a whole bunch of work on Scion, and I have and other freelancing for OPP, I kind of started looking at, spent like the kind of maybe last year and a half, kind of looking at trying other games that I maybe hadn't looked at before to see if that's something that I could find myself writing for, and kind of trying to find something. Um, there's some things with Call of Cthulhu that I just um, could not uh, see myself going that route. I took a look at City of Mist, and really just that system didn't appeal to me. And as much as some people may say system doesn't matter, um, when you have a good story, it's, as I said earlier, there's got to be that kind of love and the desire, the passion to write it. And if I'm not feeling it, I'm not doing it. So I do have a large collection of solo games that I've been meaning to try out and get through. Um, and maybe just something small, and that doesn't have to be, part of just something like little thing like that. There's a solo RPG called The Wretched, which spawned a open license for Wretched and Alone, and that's kind of what brought me into that kind of. So uh, I have decided to dedicate it by next month or so to get through my backlog of uh, RPG Zine Club that I get sent to me every month from Plus One XP, to kind of read through and uh, use that as a kind of a fresh motivation.
That's
I'm just
awesome.
going to say, Zach, that if you write one, I will help you edit and lay it out. And I know Tony, so we can potentially get Plus One to publish it. I'm just saying, if you wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah, and you could talk to Tony. He has a policy that certainly is very good for him. And that's
That's fair
a good,
too.
it's a fair policy, and I'm not very far off of that path. I'm like a half a step removed, so
Fair.
I'm by default on the bottom of the list, but I'm perfectly okay with that.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight. This has been an absolute treat, and I really do appreciate the insight that you've provided, not only on 5th edition, on World of Darkness. It's been so interesting hearing your stories, and I want to thank you for everything you've contributed. Good, bad, otherwise, like you, it's important what you do, and it's important what you've brought to the table and how much you've offered. And the love of the game never goes away if you've contributed something to it. Even if you've moved on to other interests, your love will shine through in your work, and that work will live forever as long as there's a Storytellers Vault, and as long as there are people that have a piece of that work. So I encourage everyone to go check out their work, to go get a piece of their work and add it to your collection, because they put their heart and soul into it, and they put their love of the World of Darkness into it, as well as their love of these other games. And they are very, very talented, and we should all appreciate that talent and that love and add it to our own love of the games, and our own lexicon of the games. But before I do the plugs for these two wonderful, wonderful guests, I want to do our giveaway. All night long, we have been offering these green and orange dice, which could be yours by using the hashtag DiceMePlease. So if you have entered that hashtag at any point tonight, you are in the running, and I am going to announce the winner of those dice. So the winner of these dice is Tekka Man Blade X. So Tekka, I am going to be reaching out to you, or you can just shoot me a DM, but you have won these green and orange dice. So hit me up with a DM as soon as you can, and I will get your shipping info and get these in the mail to you ASAP, so that you can have a set of your very own World of Darkness dice that can be used as a part of any chronicle. And thank you so much for participating in the giveaway tonight. Congratulations for winning those dice. So I'm going to start by promoting High Level Games. You can find High Level Games at highlevelgames.ca, and you can check out that Army Men game that they were talking so passionately about before. You can support High Level Games on Patreon, but you can find that at highlevelgames.ca. So go check out that website and check out that game. It sounds like an excellent project and an interesting game, but you can support both Josh and Zach at highlevelgames.ca and checking out that particular game. You can also support Zach and find out everything there is to find out about Zach at zachrules.com. That's Z-A-K rules, R-U-L-Z.com, where you can see that impressive array of work that Zach has created and continues to create, as well as all kinds of interesting information about our guest tonight. But it is a very, very impressive resume. You will be blown away by the creations that Zach has contributed to or created himself. I was just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling as I was preparing for this interview. And while I could have gone on and on and on about each individual piece of project, there was just so much to go over. So go check out all of those. I'm going to transition over to Josh here. Check out Werewolf the Podcast, which is one of Josh's offerings. You can find it at keepontheheartlands.podbean.com. I believe this was the podcast, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Josh, where you had a very interesting few things to say about Werewolf the Apocalypse. But this is, we need to hear all sides of the argument, and it's a very, very informed position to take, and I think it's a worthwhile listen. So go check out Werewolf the Podcast at Keep on the Heart or Hearthlands.
Heathlands. It's like my last name.
Heathlands.podbean.com. Don't listen to what I say. The links will be included in the description of this video on YouTube and Twitch as soon as this video is posted. But it is there. You'll find it. That is Werewolf the Podcast. Podbean.com. There is also another podcast I want to encourage you all to check out. That is podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/opcast, which is Opcast, Arms Around the Trinity Continuum. Now, Josh, I'd like you to go into a little bit of detail explaining what this podcast is about, as you wanted to plug it.
Sure. So the Trinity Continuum is a game line that White Wolf produced back in the 90s and now Onyx Path Publishing owns and produces. This was White Wolf's not fantasy, it was their sci-fi, superhero, and action adventure game. So there was a sci-fi setting called Aeon or Trinity, and there was a superhero setting called Aberrant, and then there was an action adventure setting called Adventure, of all things. And that was a 200-year span of time where all of these games connected to one another. And the Opcast is a podcast I do that covers the old edition and the new edition of that particular game line.
Fantastic. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't direct you to head over to Storytellers Vault. You can find both Josh and Zach's offering by just searching for their names, but I am going to include the links directly to their offerings on Storytellers Vault in the description of the video. But here is Josh's page, and you can see Crooked Smile right up at the top there, which is one of the stories for V5 that you can find, a one-shot that you could run on our server, as I had mentioned earlier. So go pick that up and run it on our server if you're interested in doing a player run one shot. But there are also a variety of other offerings. There's that Vampire Wild West that I was talking about as well. And then there's also Zach's Storyteller Vault offering with that Return to Seoris adventure that they were talking about as well. So again, lots and lots of offerings on Storytellers Vault from both of them. Go check out those pages and fill out your libraries of so much material that you can add to your games, to your characters, and to your overall knowledge base of World of Darkness, and to support our amazing guests who have taken time out of their busy schedules to be with us tonight and to have a very, very enlightening conversation with me. Thank you guys so much for taking the time tonight. I can't tell you how much of an honor it was for me to talk to two old, like myself, World of Darkness players who have gone on this journey. And while, time changes us and we move on to different passions, the love will always be there. And maybe one day we'll be able to return to the World of Darkness and find a love for it again. But if nothing else, we can take the memories with us into the future, and hope that the hobby still finds love from others going forward. But thank you so much for joining. Thank you all for watching. And if you're interested in the World of Darkness, come join our community. The Discord link is listed in the description. We are teaching people about the World of Darkness all the time. So come join us and go follow us on all the social media listed down below. But for Josh and for Zach, I'm Kent. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Have a good evening, everyone.